So now we're going to talk about the coupling devices for the truck here and also the trailer. So there's a lot of things that you have to mention that are not mentioned on this memory guide. But this video and the study guide that we give you with it will help you out with that. So starting with the airlines here and the electrics right here, you're going to mention that here at the glad hands here to here and here to here, I have blue to blue, red to red. They're not crisscrossing one another. Also, they're locked right now. This way, they're not ajar or loose at all. They're locked right here and right here. And the seal in between here and here, there's no foreign debris or dirt or dust at all. Also, these seals, they're not cracked or leaking at all. You're going to listen for leaks here and here. And here are its fittings right here and right here. They're tight. They're not loose, not cracked or leaking at all. And the hoses, there's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. They're not cracked or leaking at all. You'll listen for air leaks all along here. And then you'll go to the electrical line right here, and you'll mention that this electrical line right here is plugged in with this safety latch right here. So it has a spring right here. The spring's not loose or missing at all. It snaps in place. It locks right there. This thing's not going to come unplugged. The bracket too, there's no missing nuts or bolts at all. And it's plugged in right here. And then the condition of the wires here, there's no cut or exposed or loose wires at all. And you'll mention that the electrical line here and the air lines right here are all securely mounted or attached. Don't forget to mention all of the air lines and hoses that are and connectors that are inside the frame of the truck. So you don't want to miss those. You're going to inspect all those to make sure first they're all securely tied up. They're not twisted or sagging or hanging down here by the drive shaft at all. And the hoses too, the fittings are secured and tight. They're not cracked or leaking. The hoses are not, there's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, not cracked or leaking at all. And all the hoses and fittings are all secured and tight. And all the electrical lines, they're all plugged in and they're all securely tied up to the frame of the truck. All right. Then when you talk about the trailer, for the connectors up here, you want to mention something about these fittings right here. And the connection points are the fittings up here, and the filter locations, the fittings, and then also how this cord works right here, how it's plugged in right here, not unplugged right here, and also plugged in right here. It's locked in place. It's not unplugged at all. So starting with the connectors right here, you'll mention that they're not loose. They're tight. They're not cracked or leaking at all. The metal here, there's no missing nuts or bolts at all. It's not cracked or leaking. Same here, no missing nuts or bolts. Not cracked or leaking. The fittings are tight, not loose, not leaking at all. And then right here, all these fittings right here, they're not loose or leaking at all. The air hoses here, there's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. They're not cracked or leaking at all. And the electrical line too, there's no cut or exposed wires at all. And all these air hoses and electrical lines, they're all securely tied up to the inside of the trailer here. You'd inspect it up here, all alongside there and underneath the trailer, just to make sure that they're all securely tied up. They're not going to get caught up on the road at all. And they're all securely mounted. Then we come back here, and then you'll actually also mention that too. There's enough slack for turns, but not so much slack. They're going to get caught up in the truck or hang below the frame of the truck. So now we're going to talk about the coupling devices, the actual hardware. So we just gone through the air and electrics here for both the truck and the trailer. Now we're going to talk about how the trailer is secured to the tractor. So right here we have a fifth wheel right here. And then we have this platform and these brackets here and all these mounting bolts here. We also have the apron, and then inside here there's a kingpin, and then the locking jaws right here, and the head of the kingpin is down below there. So starting with the fifth wheel skid plate, they'll say that it's level, it's not twisted or sagging anywhere at all. And this platform right here is not rusted through anywhere at all. There's no broken or missing welds at all. The metal's not rusted through anywhere at all. And there's no gap between the platform and the frame at all. No sizable gap here at all. It's not twisted or bent anywhere at all. These mounting bolts, they're all in place. None of them are loose or missing at all. There's no shiny exposed threads at all. There's no gap between the platform and this bracket. The bracket too is straight. It's not twisted, bent at all, rusted through anywhere at all, and it's tight to the frame of the truck. It's not twisted or bent anywhere at all. There's no gap at all. And you'll mention that the bracket, all these mounting bolts and platform are all securely mounted, and the skid plate is not cracked, bent, or dented at all. You'll also mention that there's no missing pin or cotter key here. That's for the tilt. It's also properly greased here and here at the Zerks. That's for the inside there. So now we'll talk about what's going on the inside. So on the inside there, we have a kingpin. The kingpin's inside here, and the head of the kingpin is down there. You'll mention that the kingpin is straight. It's not cracked, bent, or dented at all. And also the head of the kingpin is clearly visible below the locking jaw. It's not sheared off or missing at all. And then you'll talk about the apron right here. The apron too is not cracked, bent, or dented at all. There's no broken or missing welds at all. There's no missing nuts or bolts up here at all, or shiny threads at all. The apron is securely mounted. And then you'll talk about the locking jaw. So the locking jaw is right here. You'll mention that the locking jaw is around the shank or the neck of the kingpin, exactly where it should be. The locking jaw right now is clearly visible, and it's locked in the dry position. If it were uncoupled or unlocked, this locking jaw would not be visible at all. It'd be tucked inside here. The metal's not cracked, bent, or dented at all. It's also properly greased. And then you also inspect on the inside of the locking jaw to make sure it's properly seated around the shank or the neck of the kingpin. And also there's no sizable hole or gap or space between the locking jaw and the neck of the kingpin, per se, to make sure to ensure that the trailer doesn't come ajar or come loose or anything. So, and then they'll come over here, and you'll mention the release arm, which is over here. They'll mention that on this setup, on this fifth wheel, we don't have a safety latch here. But we do have spring tension that springs in place. Right now it's locked in the dry position. If I were unlocked, this arm would be way out here. The metal is not cracked, bent, or dented at all. It's securely mounted. And then we're going to inspect this for a couple of things here. First, we're going to talk about underneath this apron right here, there's a poly plate. So we don't grease the skid plate. We have this plastic or poly plate right there. You'll mention that that poly plate is clearly visible. It's intact. It's not worn through or missing at all. It allows for the safe turn of my trailer. And then you're going to talk about a gap. So basically what you're going to say that, I'm going to come back here to make sure I don't see a gap. Because if you saw a gap between this apron and the skid plate, that may mean that this locking jaw right here could be on the head of the kingpin. In my instance, my locking jaw is around the neck of the kingpin. I don't have any sizable daylight or gap between the apron and the skid plate, and my trailer is securely connected. So basically what you're doing is saying that I'm going to take a visual inspection to make sure there isn't a gap back here. Because if I saw one, there's definitely a problem, and I want to try to resolve it. So now we're going to talk about the trailer components, the fronts, the sides, the frame, the landing gear, and the tandem release. We can get that tandem release out of the way really quickly, because in our instance right here, those wheels back there, they're locked in place. We do not have a tandem release. So you just mentioned that there's no tandem release on our trailer. Those are locked in place. So now we're going to talk about the trailer itself. So a couple of things when you talk about landing gear and clearance, you're going to mention that here between the landing gear and the foot and the ground and the back of the truck and the fifth wheel, we got plenty of space for the road and for turns. And then also right here at the landing gear, you'll mention that this foot is locked in place with this pin right here. This pin is not loose. It's not cracked, bent, or dented right now. It's not going to accidentally come loose because it's locked with a spring. That spring is tight. It's not missing. And there's also enough room for the road right here and right here. And the last thing you might mention too is that there's no ice or debris if there were winter, or mud, rocks, or whatever caught up in this thing. Because you want to be able to safely land this trailer if you had to land the trailer. And then you'll talk about no missing nuts or bolts at all here, and up there. The metal is not cracked, bent, or dented at all. There's no, it's also properly greased right here. It's secured to the frame of the trailer. It's not twisted or sagging anywhere at all. Also, this handle is stowed away and locked tight. It's not going to come loose in the dry position. So now we'll talk about the frame itself. So when I look at the frame of the truck, of the trailer here, I want to make sure first I have plenty of room and clearance for the road. My frame is nice and level with the road. It's not sagging one way or the other, which might indicate that I could have a suspension problem or a cracked or missing cross member or beam. It's nice. And then you'll mention the metal. The metal's not twisted or bent at all or cracked anywhere at all. There's no broken or missing welds on the trailer at all. The trailer can be welded, so you wouldn't mention illegal welds because it can have welds on it. And then you'll talk about these tie downs here. She'll mention that the tie downs, none of them are loose or missing at all. There's no broken or missing welds at all. The frame members here and up here on top are all straight. They're not twisted or bent at all. All the flooring or decking is in place. None of it's loose or missing. There's no missing screws at all. None of these boards are cracked at all. Everything on top here is secured. And then you'll go down below and you'll talk about all the cross members underneath the trailer. So you want to mention that there's no loose or missing cross members at all. They're all secured to the trailer. There's no broken or missing welds at all. The metal's not cracked, bent, or dented at all. And you'll mention everything below here, alongside here, is all securely mounted and ready for my cargo, and also strong enough for my cargo. When we get to the back of the trailer, you could mention the ramps, or you could do that right now. You could say that right now these ramps, they're locked up in the dry position with these brackets right here. There's no missing pins or cotter keys at all. Here, the mounting bracket right here, there's no broken or missing welds at all, no missing nuts or bolts. That shaft is straight. It's not bent or cracked at all. There's no loose or missing springs at all. Right now, they're straight and locked up tight. They're not twisted or sagging anywhere at all. There's no broken or missing rungs here at all, or steps at all. And then you'd mention that the ramps, along with the frame of the truck here, everything's secured and tight and ready for my cargo. right, so now we're going to talk about the lights and reflectors on the trailer. So the first thing you're going to want to point out is that you have DOT approved tape up here, and also DOT approved tape here on the side of my trailer. So you'll mention that all this DOT approved tape is secured to the trailer. None of it's obstructed at all. All of it's clean and clear and securely mounted. And then you'll talk about the light and reflector here. Here. Up there. Here, the license plate light. The ABS light and the light and reflector back here. The first thing I'll mention is you'll say that all of the lights and reflectors, they're all secured to the truck. The rubber pieces here, they're all intact. They're not loose or missing at all. Also, there's no loose or hanging wires or exposed wires at all. All the plastic here is clean, clear, not cracked at all. There at the license plate light, there's no loose or missing license plate light at all. Same up here. Everything's clean, clear, not cracked. No loose or hanging wires at all. Up there too as well. And also over here. Clean, clear, not cracked. This rubber piece is intact. There's no loose or hanging wires at all. All the lights and reflectors are securely mounted and have the proper color up front, which is amber, and the proper color in the back, which is red. And then I'm going to mention too that this ABS light right here, I may mention this when I do the actual light check and when I got power coming to the trailer. But at some point, you're going to talk about the ABS light. You'll mention that if that ABS light were on, that means I don't have ABS on my trailer, but I still have normal braking. I would get my trailer serviced as soon as possible. And then you have DOT approved tape here. It's all adhered to the truck. It's all clean and clear. It's not loose or peeling at all. And I have at least 50% of coverage of the DOT approved tape here on the side of my trailer. Now we're going to talk about the trailer axles, the suspension and brakes and tires. So back here, if you hadn't mentioned already that we don't have a tandem release, that was further up in the document. But if you missed it for some reason, this would be a good time to mention it. There isn't a tandem release. These are locked in place. Also, starting from the outside and in, we're going to talk about the tires here and here. And you'll point to the insides of these tires and the outsides, and also the tread right here. So starting with the insides here and here, and outside here and here on the tires. They'll mention that there's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. They're not cracked or leaking at all. Also, there's no exposed belts or threads. And then you'll talk about the tread depth here and here. It's not worn too thin. It's at least 2/32 deep here and also here. And then you'll mention the fact that these can be recap tires. These are not. However, if they were, the tread's not coming loose anywhere at all. And also, you inspect to make sure that the tires are properly seated with the rim. There's no exposed beads at all. Also on the inside of the tire, too, as well. No exposed beads at all on the inside of the tire. So, and then you'll say that they're the same type and size. I don't have mismatched sizes or types of tires at all. I don't want that. And also, they have to be properly inflated. So I'm going to read the spec on the tire. And then with an air gauge, I'm going to inspect it at the valve stems here and also there. The valve stems are clearly visible. They're not obstructed or hidden. They're not cracked or leaking at all. The fittings are tight. Dust caps are in place. And make sure that you say that you're going to check these for proper inflation with a tire gauge. They want to hear that. They don't want to hear that you're going to use a rubber mallet. or your foot or anything. So, because you're checking for proper inflation, and to do that, you can only do that with a tire gauge. So, the tires here and here are securely mounted. The rims, you're going to inspect the rims both outside here, and on the inside of these of the rims to make sure first they're properly seated to the tires, and then also that there's no illegal welds. You'll inspect that, make sure there's no illegal welds, and the metal's not cracked, bent, or dented at all. In this instance right here, these are steel rims, so they're not rusted through anywhere at all. There's no rust holes at all. And where the lugs and the lug nuts meet the rims too as well, there's no out of round holes, which might indicate that at one time that these rims were loose or running loose at some point, and they are not. And then you'll talk about the lugs and the lug nuts here, and also here. You'll mention that first, all of the lugs and lug nuts, none of them are loose or missing at all. None of them are broken or cracked at all. There's no shiny threads or metal shavings inside the rim here or here at all. And all these lug nuts are tight to the rim. None of them are loose at all. There's no space or gap between the lug nut and the rim. And you can also mention that you might look for some rust trails potentially. But I think out of round holes or gaps would be a greater indicator than rust trails. So you just want to make sure that those are all tight to the rim and securely mounted. All right, so now we'll talk about the hub oil and seal here and here. You'll mention that I do have a hub seal here and here. The seal is not worn through, cracked, or leaking at all. If it had been leaking, I would see an indication on the inside of the rim right here and here. That would clue me in. I don't want to see that. And also that I would inspect to make sure that I have enough oil in the hub here and here. And if I were low, I would add it where these caps are here and also there. All right. So then working from the outside in, now we'll talk about brakes here. So starting with the brake drums right here and also right there. You're going to mention that you're going to inspect the metal to make sure that there's no illegal welds. You're going to look inside these drums right here in there to make sure that they're dry. There's no oil or grease on the inside of the drums at all. Also, there's no signs of warping or discoloration inside these drums at all. And then you'll inspect the brake lining here and here to make sure that they're not worn too thin at all. There's at least a 1/4 inch of brake lining here and also back here. And they're evenly worn all the way around here and here and side to side. And none of that brake lining is loose or missing at all. They too are dry, no oil or grease there or there though. And then following the brakes here, you'll follow the ABS line that goes back to the brake chamber right here. And on that side of the axle, there's a slack adjuster and the push rod comes in this way. So the ABS line, you'll mention that the ABS line right here, it's securely attached. It's also plugged in. There's no cover exposed wires. The ABS line is securely mounted. The brake chamber right here, you'll mention that the brake chamber is securely attached to the bracket right here. The brake chamber itself is not cracked, dented, or leaking at all. When there's air in this brake chamber, you'll listen for air leaks. The C-clamp is not loose or missing at all. There's no missing nuts or bolts at all. The bracket too is intact. It's not rusted through. There's no broken or missing welds, no missing nuts or bolts. And there's no sizable gap between the brake chamber and this bracket. The brake chamber is also not sagging or hanging loose at all. No missing nuts or bolts or shiny exposed threads. The slack adjuster is right here in front of the axle. The slack adjuster is properly greased at its bushings. And then also there's no missing pins or cotter keys at the push rod. The push rod is straight. It's not bent or cracked at all. It's not going to get bound up in the brake chamber at all. And to check play right here, I'm going to have to block or chock these tires and then release the trailer brake. And then I'm going to pull those push rods by hands and make sure there's no more than 1 inch of play and it's even on all sides. The brake hoses to the brake chambers come into the rear and the inside right there. The fittings are tight. They're not loose, cracked, or leaking. Also, the hoses there, you would check those to make sure there's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. It's not cracked or leaking, and you would listen for air leaks all along there. So that takes care of the brakes and the tires and the rims and the hub oil seal and so on and so forth. Now you have the suspension components. So we have spring mounts and the leveler and the springs. And you'll mention to the examiner that we don't have airbags or shocks in our trailer. We just have springs. So you'll talk about the springs here to make sure none of them are loose or missing. There's many of them, so they're not scissoring one another. They're directly on top of one another. They're not rusted through anywhere at all. There's no missing nuts or bolts at all. And they're secured to the axle here with these U-bolts. These U-bolts are not loose at all. They're not crack, bent, or dented, and there's no missing nuts or bolts at all. All those nuts are tight, none of them are loose. There's no shiny exposed threads. The U-bolts and the springs here are securely mounted. The leveler here is not rusted through anywhere at all. It's not crack, bent, or dented at all. There's no missing nuts or bolts at all. And inside this leveler, there's some bushings. You'll inspect those bushings to make sure that the bushings are intact. They're not loose or missing at all. And then you'll point out on these brackets right here, there's no broken or missing welds here at the brackets for the spring mounts at all, right there. And right there in the front. And no missing nuts or bolts at all. And the spring mounts, leveler, and all these springs and the U-bolts are securely mounted. So now we're going to talk about the rear of the trailer and lights and reflectors. So coming here to the rear of the trailer, we're going to talk about the lights and reflectors, this DOT approved tape here on the wheel wells and up on the ramps, and then also potentially the ramps themselves if you missed them. So if you were talking about the frame of the trailer and you missed those, then you would address those now. But in this case, we got those when we talked about the frame of the trailer. So we'll just talk about lights and reflectors. And also potentially the rear of this trailer too as well. We'll mention that it's nice and level with the ground right here. It's not sagging anywhere at all. Here at the rear of the trailer, there's no loose or missing deck boards up there, missing screws at all. And then you'll mention that you have DOT approved tape right here. This DOT approved tape is clean and clear. It's not obstructed at all. It's all adhered properly to the trailer. And it covers 100% of the visual space back here. So they don't mean literally 100% everywhere. They just mean the visual space. If you were from driving behind this vehicle, you would see that the reflective tape covers 100% of the visual space. Also, the lights and reflectors down here, they're all clean and clear. None of them are loose or missing at all. None of them are cracked at all. There's no loose or hanging wires at all. And all the bushings are in place. None of them are torn or loose or missing at all. All the lights and reflectors back here are securely mounted and the proper color red. All right, so I'm going to talk about the ramps. So the ramps here, they're secured and locked up in the drive position with these brackets right here. The brackets are not crack bent or dented. No missing pins or cotter keys at all. Down below here at this load bearing bracket, there's no broken or missing welds at all. It's also not twisted or bent at all or cracked. There's no missing nuts or bolts here or shiny exposed threads. The shaft itself is straight. It's not bent or twisted or sagging anywhere at all. There's no missing pins or cotter keys at all. No loose or missing springs. None of those springs are broken or cracked at all. These are locked up and straight. They're not twisted or sagging or hanging down low and loose at all. They're locked up tight in the dry position. And also there's no loose or missing steps at all or broken or missing welds at all. And the ramps here are securely mounted and also strong enough for my cargo.